Hey kids, today we are going to create a side-scrolling shooter game. This is going to teach us a little bit about how to clone sprites in Scratch and also how we can make projectiles. Now this is not endorsing any sort of violence whatsoever. This is just going to be a simple little fun cat and mouse game. Well, what's my project going to be? Well, if you see here, I have a little cat ready to pounce. And when I hit the green flag right here, some mice are going to invade. And woo, that went quick. And I can move up and down. And if I hit the space bar, I am going to shoot some arrows at my mice here. And you can see my arrows, when they get to the end of the screen, they disappear. Whenever an arrow touches a mouse, it disappears as well. And then when I get touched by a mouse, my character switches to an X, and the game is over. To start it again, we just hit our flag. Now, my game is a mouse. This could be anything. It could be a space game with asteroids, whatever you want. This can also be falling games, kids. So don't think if you're scrolling as in the left or right. You can also go up or down. I am here just to show you the framework. At the end of the video, we'll talk about project outlines. But as always, I encourage you to take it a step further. Let's go ahead and create this game. The first thing I'm going to do, as always, is to lay out my sprites and any background I want. I'm going to keep this simple. As always, kids, as I said before, I encourage you to make this as detailed as possible. I'm here just showing you the outline of it. First, I want to get rid of that cat. Let's go look for some sprites here. If you see, cat 2 was the cat that I used. So I'm going to import that one. Set it over there. I'm going to look for another sprite. This one I want a mouse. There's my little mouse friend. And I need my arrow for shooting. I'm going to kind of put these in the direction it goes. Cat, shooter, mouse. Let's rename these. This is going to be the user. This is going to be my ammo. And this is going to be my bad NPC or non-playable character. First thing I want to do is switch this mouse around. It is definitely the wrong direction. We're just going to flip it horizontally. And let's shrink it down a little. We're going to learn another way to do this here, but I just want to get it just a little. I'm going to move my characters here to kind of how I want it to be. Mouse is going to run in from this direction. Cat's going to move up and down here, and it's going to shoot from its brain. It's giving it positive thoughts. This cat's a little big. I'm going to shrink this down a little. And my arrow is definitely too big. And we just switch that down. We'll move these both over now. That looks pretty good for my starting screen there. I think I have everything loaded. I would encourage you, as part of yours, to put a backdrop down. I don't like any of the preloaded ones, so we're just going to kind of skip that for now. We're going to imagine a nice living room floor. Well, let's get to some coding. As always, we are going to start with our green flag. When it's clicked, we want to put its location in. So we're going to go to this location right here. And we're also going to switch the costume to the correct one. Cat 2. Let's go to our costumes here. We're going to rename this one to user as well. So we have them both the same. So we're switching costume to the user costume there. Now we want to do our movement. On one of our other projects, we used the control or the event when the up, right, or down arrow is clicked, we did something. Well, let's do something a little different now. Let's use a repeat until block right here. And we're going to repeat until what? Well, if we go down to sensing here, we can do until we are touching our bad NPC. While that's going on, we want to do something. Let's do an if statement here. If what? Well, back in sensing, we had if the up arrow is pressed, we are going to move 10 steps. Same thing again. If the down arrow is pressed, we are going to move negative 10 steps. Let's give it a try. Whoop. That's only going up an arrow, but that's moving it in the up and down or the forward and back direction. What do we have to do? Well, I have moved 10 steps. And while that's correct, we want it to be in a specific direction. And remember, we have two axes here. We have our Y and our X axis. So let's change our Y steps by 5 and negative 5. Now when we go, look at that. That's working pretty good. That right there just takes care of our X direction. Let's go ahead and take care of our shooting part next. Let's click over here. Let's go to our costumes. We can get rid of a lot of these costumes here. We don't need the other directions. We just need the one direction. Always we are going to set this up. We are going to have it when the green flag is clicked. Switch to costume 1A. And we want to hide. So we just want to make sure we're in the right costume. Hit the flag, it hides right there. We have to tether it or attach it to our sprite here. How's this going to work? Well, I want it when I hit the space bar here, I want it to shoot. If we go over here, when I press the space bar, we can have something happen. We need this to happen a bunch of times. If you go under your control, you see we can create a clone of it. This means every time you hit the space bar, you want to create another clone of the arrow. That'll give the effect that we have multiple shots of the arrow. Let's see what this looks like. Well, it's not doing anything right now because all I have it doing is going to a location and hiding and then creating a clone of itself. We have down here, when I start as a clone, we can have something happen. Well, what do we always usually happen? We usually set the position, right? So we are going to go to 160. This is going to be in the X direction. We want it locked. That means it can't move forward. And we want to change the Y. What do we want to change the Y to? If we go back to sensing, down here, once we drop this in, we get two options here for this one. We don't want to see where the stage is at or the bad sprite. We want to know where the user's at. And we can set that Y position of the user. That means this block says, go to this X position, and then wherever the user is, that is your Y position. Pretty neat little line of code if you ask me. After that, we want to hit show. Let's see if anything happens now. As you can see, anytime I hit the space bar, an arrow appears. See how it's sensing the Y position? That just takes care of it appearing. Let's make it travel across this. We are going to repeat until, and if you come over here into sensing, we can do it until it's touching the edge. That means this arrow is going to appear or be shown until it hits the edge of the screen. Last part is just making it move. That means we're going to move 10 steps. And then once we get to the end, we want to delete this clone. Let's see if that works. Stop, start. We go up. And there you go. Pew, 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 pew. It's working pretty well. That takes care of the shooting aspect of my game. The next part is going to be what happens when this arrow touches the mouse. Let's go ahead and take care of that coding. Much like the rest of these, when I click this, I want my costume to switch to, let's take care of some of the costumes here. We don't need mouse B. This is just going to be our bad NPC. Going back to our code, after we click this, we want something to happen. So let's go ahead and broadcast start. This is going to be the start of making my mouse appear. Now, much like the arrows, we need clones because we want a couple of these going at a time. Then we want to hide this character here too. We want a couple of these going at a time. That means we're going to go down to when I start as a clone, I want something to happen. Now, I haven't created a clone down here yet. I want 4 batches of Mies here to run across the screen. That means I want to repeat 10 times, not 10, let's do 4 because I want 4 Mies. And I want to create a clone of this character. Now when I start as a clone, I want to show this. What do I always do first? Well, I always set the position. So we want to go to an X and Y position. Remember how we locked this in over here? Well, I want to do the same thing over here, but I just want to take it slightly off screen. Let's move this over here and do a go to there. So the character starts slightly off screen. For the Y, well, we just want a random location over here for it to start at. We got 4 characters, so it's going to appear 4 characters, and they're going to be somewhere either top, middle, or bottom of the screen. That's a Y location. Let's go to a random number of, and over here, we don't want to get too high. Let's say 140. That means we're going to go negative 140 to 140. As you can see there, it's just going to random locations, all 4 of them. I still have my clone here. Do not worry, we're going to take care of that. But for right now, we won't worry about it. Now, to make this game a little more interesting, I think these things should come at me at a different speed. So it shouldn't be the same uniform marching distance. That would make the game pretty repetitive and boring. That means I'm going to go to a new variable here. I'm going to make my variable, and we're going to call this one speed. Now we are going to set speed right here to a random number again between, let's say, -2 to -10. And what this is going to do is this is going to set the, when we move the y direction, to a random moving number, somewhere between -10 and -2. Why -10 and -2? That's just because it's moving in this direction. If we wanted to go in the other direction, it would just be a positive number. How long do we want this to go over? Well, we want this to repeat until what? So let's put a repeat until block in here. And if we go back to our sensing and we do a repeat until touching the ammo. So we want this to keep going until it touches our arrow. Let's take care of that motion now. So we want to change the X over here. Change X to our variable speed. That's going to handle how different it moves. Nothing's going to happen yet. See how they go to different speed every time I click it? I could make this different. Let's say if we went down to -8, the closer we get, the closer the speeds are. Don't get this too fast. If your user never sees your spray coming, it's not a very fair game. So all this block so far has done is just taking care of speed. Looking real well, this is an ammo. We want this to be the user, so we want this to go until it touches the user. Let's see if it goes. There we go. Now it touches the user there. So speed still works. We just want this to repeat until the mouse touches the user. This takes care of our object moving, but we want it to disappear when it gets to the end, or something to happen when it gets to the end here. That means we're going to need some if statement here. And I'm going to put in if right there. That means if our X position over here is less than 220. So which one's 220 here? If we look down here, you can see our 220 is going to be over here. So let's say 220, our position 220, right about there. If it gets to 220, we want it to go back to its original location and then start over, right? Because if it misses, it can keep going. We don't want it to create another clone. That means we are going to go to our 240 regular 240 here. And then we're going to pick a random number. Which one? Same thing here. Oops. The same random number we use for y, so something over here. So we want to keep in the same constraints there. Let's see what happens. Now the characters pass by. So it keeps repeating until I get it. Now I could, if I wanted to, when it gets to this position, I could have it just delete this clone as well. So if I go to my controls here and hit delete this clone, you will see, if I can miss these, it would just delete. So either one you want to do, I prefer just for it to recycle back. But again, this is your own preference here. That deals with what happens once it gets to the edge of the screen. Let's deal with what happens if it touches my arrow. So let's put another if statement in here. And this one is going to be when touching the ammo. So when my arrow comes across, what happens? I probably want to end up keeping score of this, right? So let's go to our variables. Let's hide our speed. We know what that does now. And let's make one that says score. Is always if we set a variable when the green flag is clicked here, we probably want to set this variable or set score to 0. So that just helps us out. Over here, if it's touching the ammo, we want to change the score by 1. We probably also want to make a sound. Why not, right? So let's make a sound. Pop is one of the ones that just first come up. We can do that one. Let's see what happens now. There we go. Now let's get rid of this clone. Once we touch it, we can go down here to delete this clone once we get the popping sound. So now, every time it touches it, we get another clone. There's one other thing we want to do. As you notice, my game ended, right? So as I go over here, I got a score of 1, and every time I get it, it deletes this. But we can just put another line of code here. Let's go to duplicate this one here, put it over there. Now every time I hit it, and if I don't delete this clone, it'll just go back to the start. So now I get another clone every time I touch another one. So the game keeps on going. Now, as you can see here, we still have this clone here. And this clone needs to go away. And all we really have to do, if we go to our looks over here, we just hit hide. Now, it doesn't matter what's going on. Our mouse is hidden. One last thing we have to do down here, once this actually does repeat until the user touches it, we want the game to end. Let's go over to our looks over here. Let's say game over for 2 seconds. And then we're going to stop all the script. So everything stops happening. I'm also going to broadcast a new message called game over. And when game over happens, when I receive game over, I want to hide the sprite. When I hide it, I got to show it. So when the green flag is clicked, we're going to do that. Look at that go. Let's go ahead and get hit. Game over. All the sprites will leave once that script gets running. Remember, it's a repeat until, so it'll do it. It has to run through the block over here until it gets to a stop over. That also means it has to go for quick time. So just keep that in mind. I hit go, and there you go. We can do one last thing here. Let's make our cat change if it does get hit by one of these bad NPCs. And that's pretty easy to do. When the green flag is clicked, we want to go on forever. And if it is touching the bad NPC, we want to switch to a new character. Let's upload a new one here. I'm just going to use a little red X for an explosion. If we can find it. We'll go to an X. Oops. I just want an extra costume. Find my little red X again. I'm going to call this touching NPC. And then when touching NPC, switch costume to touching NPC. Switch costume to user on green flag. There we go. Looks like my speeds are flying through here. I'll have to check those. Let's let a, whoop, there it goes, game over. Stop the script, there we go. Everything looks pretty good to me, kids. Again, look at the different speeds they go at when you start, and then as you click it, the characters go away. If you get touched, it says game over, stops the game, switches your costume. Pretty fun and pretty simple. Do not take my basic theme here to underestimate the power of this code. There is a lot you can do with it just by switching out sprite costumes. Let's go ahead and talk about your project, kids. Well, here's the project, kids. You need one intro screen. You need a sprite that only moves in one direction, whether that's on the side or the top or bottom. You need a sprite that clones itself when something happens, whether that's when something's caught or something's shot or whatever. Code that hides a sprite whenever it's touched. Clones that disappear after that code is run. So think of a side scroller. When it reached the end, it either disappeared or went back to the beginning. The clones have to repeat themselves so the game keeps going at least until a score is reached, or the character or the user sprite is touched. Whatever way, it keeps running until something happens. You need some sort of scoring mechanism. The game needs to reset the play again without hitting the green flag. I did not show that on my video, but I've showed that to you countless times. So if you need help with that, please come see me, but that is not on the video. You need a winning or losing screen. Again, that is not on a video. Some sort of sound incorporated into your game, and a theme to your game. If you want to make it extra special, add a timer, add a shot counter. You can add multiple different clones, not just the same one. Sprites that change costume when touched, maybe an explosion. Maybe sprites that move in more in one direction. Maybe it moves left and right and up and down. And as I said before, kids, nothing violent's going to be accepted. Keep it appropriate. If any of your legal guardians would blush to see this, then it probably is inappropriate. As always, if you have any questions, come see me. I can't wait to see what you code, kids. Good luck!